Okay, so like we were just talking about, Anne, this is just a huge surprise. But for people who might not really understand what's going on, um, can you explain how big of a deal this is and why this is such a big deal?
It is certainly one of the largest bombshells we could have gotten out of this. I mean, there's just absolutely no way anyone could have been prepared for this. And it sounds like not even the victims' families were prepared for what they were about to hear. Uh, for him to be able to go forward to plead guilty at this point was an extraordinary move. And I think that, you know, to lay the groundwork for this a little bit, last week we saw that some of his very important motions to delay a typical pre-trial motion was rejected. Then you had other concerns about alternative perpetrators to this crime, and he's been struggling, and his defense has been struggling. So I actually, my ears went up last week when I heard that he was not getting anywhere with a delay and that sort of thing. And I wondered, is this an opportunity right then and there to make a plea deal? And as we know, more than 90% of cases in America end up in a plea deal. So as far as the statistics go, that this is not shocking that he would be making a plea deal, but this case had such a huge impact on the entire country that there is this level of justice for the families that we're going to hear about. It really is going to roll through the country for us to be able to understand not only why the prosecutors have reportedly decided to do this plea deal, how the families are going to be able to handle it, and what it means for Kohberger himself.
Sorry, I almost forgot that I had muted myself. So speaking on the families, I don't know if you can maybe clear this up for me. I thought that the families had to know and had to agree before a plea was sent out. Is that correct?
I think that there's like a level. I don't know that for sure, honestly.
Okay.
I would check that, but you can, if it turns out to be this case, basically with a plea deal, it certainly is something that we expect the victims' families to be well aware of. And you have multiple victims' families involved in this. So we don't know right now, because we're just getting this information in, how much the families possibly knew, if it was on the cards, if there are so many ifs right now. We're going to be speculating whether or not any of the families knew, but we're talking about a large group of victims who are dealing with this information right now. So I think that we're going to understand it a little bit better over the next few days. This case was going to resonate with every single parent in America, every single family in America. So we all feel like we're part of this story to some degree. And I think it's incredibly difficult to even think that there will ever be justice, no matter what that justice looks like. And that's got to be something that the prosecutors were dealing with as well. Now, were they worried about the some level of exploitation going on with Kohberger, that he was going to live in this limelight? Were those some of the concerns that the prosecutors were looking at? Were they concerned about the financial burden to the system? We don't know exactly, and we're not going to know right now why the prosecutors decided to go forward with this. But we are looking at, reportedly, from what we've been told, not only a guilty plea, but that he would never have the opportunity to get out of prison. So as that information starts to digest, we'll be able to see how much the families knew. I mean, right now we're getting very early reports from just social media that the family's unhappy about it, or one of the victims' families is very unhappy about this. So we'll have to see how that all comes together. But it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah. So is this, You were talking about the statistics and that about 90% end up in a plea agreement, but is it common for it to be this late? Because jury selection was supposed to start in a month.
It's unbelievable. Plea deals go up until the very last minute. I've seen plea deals go literally right up to the line. And I don't know if it's because of the magnitude of the case that's about to go down, or the feeling that there was no way out, allegedly for this defendant, if he felt like he was in a situation where there was no way out. And when death penalty is on the table, this is a very different trial that we would have been looking at. And it is a lot longer. It's extremely expensive. There's 2 phases to it. Not only do you find that he's guilty, then you have to go through the death penalty phase of actually moving forward with a death sentence. So it is an incredibly long, laborious process. And then there are years of appeals. Because you don't just, this kind of sentence is automatically appealed, right? So you would be looking at years of appeals, years of victims' families going to trials, still speaking about, why he must, get the death penalty or however it was going to work out. Now, in this case, it looks like there's no chance for parole. So were the prosecutors looking at this like this was an opportunity to move forward, and without the victims' families having to go through years of different levels in this case? We don't know. We don't know yet.
Sorry, I was just taking some notes there. So can you kind of talk us through what's next? I know that you've been on so many high-profile cases and you've seen a lot of things. So from your expertise, what are the next steps here?
Well, this information is so fresh, but what we're learning is that there is going to need to be a hearing. They're going to have to work out the details of this plea agreement. We're gonna hear a lot more about what this plea agreement looks like. He's going to have to change he's changing from not guilty, which, basically a judge had put in for him. And now we've got to change it to a plea of guilty. So that's a whole hearing in itself. And from what I understand, that's supposed to be taking place later this week. So they obviously want to move forward with this very quickly. Now, sentencing is up to the schedules. And sometimes even in the highest profile case, it always comes down to what the schedules look like for the judges and what cases are already happening. Because even though all of our focus right now is on this case and on the tragedy and the magnitude of this case, we have, hundreds, if not thousands, of cases that are going through the Idaho system right now that also are looking for justice. So they're going to try and keep to some level of a schedule with the courts and make sure that they're not just throwing everything to the wind. And hopefully they'll be able to get to sentencing pretty quickly if everyone has actually agreed to what we've heard about, and that the judge has weighed in the way it's being reported. And when information comes in like this very quickly, and it's a surprise, you wonder how much has actually been going on in the background. I don't think that with this level of a plea agreement, it may have been done in ultimate secrecy, just because obviously, the media's been paying so much attention, as is the public. But the chances that the prosecution has been working on this for a while, I would say is pretty high. And, we heard from the defense last week. I just keep on going back to those hearings and how difficult it was for her to make any progress with the judge, to be able to get more time to look at discovery and try and come up with new avenues for defense. and it was just getting shut down. And I remember I literally sent a note to a colleague last week and said, is this his chance to plea? Like, is this what we could be looking at? And that's exactly what it appears we're looking at. And I think it's important that we remember that this is just what's being reported right now, and we're just learning all of the factors that are going to go into how the court handles this.
Is there anything else that I didn't ask that you think is important to touch on?
Well, I think that we need to be paying a lot of attention to how the victims' families feel about this. They have an advocate that traditionally works with victims' families. So I'm hoping that we're going to hear from the victims' family side to find out how they're processing this information. And I think we're processing it, meaning the public and the media, are processing it at the same time they are, which has got to be an incredibly difficult thing. So I hope that they get to a place where there's some level of justice for these victims. And that's what everybody's hoping for. Everybody relates to this case. I've got a daughter who's in college, so it's every parent's worst nightmare. And we're hoping that this will stop this level of evil in its tracks.